start with the mistake or error atau kekilafan. Kekilafan ya. So get ready of your ICC KUA Perdata, because we will go back and forth to look into what is explained in the presentation, but also what is written in the Indonesian Civil Code. Yeah. A mistake, error happens if one of the parties errs on essential matters from what has been agreed upon. Ya, errors on essential matters, artinya hal-hal yang pokok ya. Or on the essential characters of the good, ya, atau sifat-sifat atau karakter dari benda yang diperjanjikannya, that becomes the object of an agreement. Or to whom the agreement is made, ya, atau bahkan kekilafan bisa terjadi berkaitan dengan pihak, ya, artinya to whom the agreement is made. Ternyata orang yang saya pikir A ternyata bukan A, ya. If there is no error on those things, he or she will not give his or her consent on the agreement. Yeah, of course, yeah. Since there is an error, that's why we state that condition as defective will or an exception of consensual principle, right? Because we learned last week about the case between the two parties. Yeah, one is the marketing, one is the party who wants to promote their products, and the judges considered that there was no agreement made yet. Yeah, there was no agreement made yet. But when we talk about mistake or error, there is an agreement made already, but the consensus is defective, yeah, because there is a mistake or error. That's why it is said that if there is no error on those things, he or she will not give his or her consent on the agreement, meaning he already signed agreement, but then he found out later on that there was a mistake or there was an error. And then we will talk about what the person that is erred, ya, artinya orang yang yang khilaf itu, what he can do then. So error on good, ini maksudnya kekilafan atas barang ya. Error on good, someone buys a painting that he thought of as Basuki Abdullah's painting, but then it is found out that it is only its copy or its derivative, misalnya ya, turunannya atau salinannya, tiruannya ya. So error on good, someone buys a painting. So he thought, yeah, well, this is just an example, yeah. I don't know whether it is still possible, yeah. I think sometimes it is not easy to differentiate between mistake, error, and fraud, yeah. We can look about fraud later on, but perhaps the difference will be the fraud will be actively did or done by the party doing the fraud, yeah. But this may not be, yeah. The seller may not be actively promoting this Basuki Abdullah's painting, but it happened, yeah. Someone, maybe the seller doesn't know also, yeah, maybe, yeah. So the buyer of the painter realized that it is not a Basuki Abdullah's painting. But of course, in the market itself, if we want to buy something that is not original, of course, it is quite common that the price will be much less, right? Let's say Basuki Abdullah's painting, it's I don't know, perhaps billions of rupiah, yeah, maybe depending on the painting, but I believe it is more than 1 billion already for each of his painting. But the copy of it of course will be much less, yeah, maybe less than 10 million. Of course, when that happen, when it is the case, people will be aware in advance that this is a copy only. This is not the original version, of course. So I don't know whether or not this kind of example can happen. Error on good, yeah, but the example is quite clear. An error on person: if a director of opera house enters into an agreement with a person that he thought of as a famous singer, but found out that only the name is the same but different person. Yeah, this is also another example that should not happen in this age, yeah, in this era, yeah, when we have many things we can check easily through Google. We can check a person name, whether he is a student, for example, whether he is a lawyer, for example, and where does he work, for example, right? We can check everything easily, yeah, now. But perhaps these examples were made, and the Indonesian Civil Code, of course, were very old, right? Before the technology is like this. But I don't know whether it is still possible to have an error on good, an error on person, yeah. Maybe, yeah. Maybe I think there is still a possibility, but the chance, I think, is not as big as old times, yeah. Nowadays we can check easily everywhere about anyone, also about the goods, right? About this type of painting. If we visit, like, for example, we can see so many drawings, yeah. It's a derivative or copy from a famous painting, and it's everywhere, right? If we go to, for example, that's also the same. So error on good, error on person, even though it might be possible this time, but I think the chance to have it is very slim, yeah, because everything is transparent, everything is publicized, and we can know a lot of things already, even before we make a deal, right? So the other party to the agreement, one that is not heir, must have known that the other party, one that is heired, has been under a mistake. So the other party to the agreement, meaning the party, the other party in the agreement, lawan janjinya, ya. One that is not heir, one is not doing the error, one that is not experiencing the error, right? Must have known that the other party has been under a mistake or under an error. So if that is the case, it will mean that from the beginning, even though it may not be an active action, like we will see in the fraud understanding or fraud concept, but it will mean that he must be aware, right? He must be aware that he is not a correct person to go to, or he is not selling a correct or true good, benda yang benar, to this guy. So it will mean also that in the claim proceeding in the court, the party that is heired, ada pihak yang mengalami kekhilafan ini, must prove, ya, that this guy, the other party, is aware from the beginning that it is not the case, ya. The object of the agreement is not in accordance with what has been agreed. So let's see from the Kawah Perdata. So from Kawah Perdata, you can look from starting after 1320, ya. There is 1322, ya. So 1321, tiada sepakat yang sah apabila sepakat itu diberikan karena kekhilafan atau diperolehnya dengan paksaan atau penipuan. So 1320 talks about validity of agreement, and then the 1320 and until next we'll talk about the first element, the second element, the third element, the fourth element. Yeah, so it goes on until 1337 actually. Yeah, because 1321 to 1337 we'll talk about each of elements. The kekhilafan is under 1322. Ya, kekhilafan tidak mengakibatkan batalnya suatu perjanjian selain apabila kekhilafan itu terjadi mengenai hakikat barang yang menjadi pokok perjanjian. Kekhilafan itu tidak menjadi sebab kebatalan jika kekhilafan itu hanya terjadi mengenai dirinya orang, dengan siapa seorang bermaksud membuat suatu perjanjian. Kecuali jika perjanjian itu telah dibuat terutama karena mengingat dirinya orang tersebut. Kekhilafan tidak mengakibatkan batalnya suatu perjanjian selain apabila kekhilafan itu terjadi mengenai hakikat barang yang menjadi pokok perjanjian. Okay. And then the 1320 talks about paksaan, ya, duress. So we will go the 1320 and then after that we will jump in for the consequence of the mistake, error, duress, fraud and everything. Yeah. Okay, this is abuse of state. So before this, I want to explain about this first, about the duress first. Yeah. So duress not only means acts of violence, but more broadly include any threat of harm to one's legal interest. The point is not the violence, but the fear that arises from the violence. Yeah. Duress causes fear and encourages people to have will and declare according to the will that is in them. But his will is not pure because it is influenced by fear. For example, threat that his secret will be exposed, or threat that he will be killed if he do not sign that agreement. Yeah. If he or she does not sign that agreement. The object of a threat must be something against the law. Okay. Let's see. Professor Subekti explains about this too. Yeah. He said that mainly when we are talking about duress, yeah, Professor Subekti said that the duress in here is not about physical, yeah, but only related to psychological pressure, or spiritual, yeah, or mental pressure, yeah. So it won't be referring to any physical coercion, yeah, or physical threat. So I think this his opinion might be different with Jay Satrio, yeah, because I believe Jay Satrio has a wider interpretation on this. But Professor Subekti also made a good point. He said like this, yeah, if it is a physical coercion, like your hand is dragged to sign an agreement, yeah, so your hand is taken by someone else and your hand is dragged to sign something. That, he said, is not coercion under this Kawah Perdata, yeah, because that would mean that he's supposed not to enter into agreement, yeah. But this duress, yeah, under the agreement is a defective will, right? It's a defective consent, meaning that he is signing the agreement himself, yeah? Nobody drag his hand and sign it, yeah. So he signs it by himself. but he signed it due to certain threats. Yeah, maybe one threat or more than one threat. So that's why he was mentally and spiritually and also physically are threatened. Yeah, perhaps in here his secret will be exposed. Maybe he has some secrets, and if you want to make a deal with me, that I won't expose your secret if you want to make a deal with me. Yeah, that is under duress. Yeah, or a gangster made a deal with this guy, and the gangster will say that if you don't sign it, I will kill your family, for example. I think we have seen a lot of those things, right, in the movie. It is not really related to the agreement, but it is related to a lot of things, right? Threat. Yeah, so duress. If there is a duress, yeah, it is not automatically nullified. Why is it? Yeah, why is it not null and void? Yeah, is it not? Is it not? Wouldn't it very clear that duress is something that is bad under the agreement, right? If someone do thing like that, why we have to appreciate the agreement? Yeah, but those people having a defective will, like someone who is under error, mistake, or under duress, and also under fraud, we will look also. They might think that it is fine to do that anyway, right? At least my family is saved. Yeah, at least my secret is not exposed. Yeah? So even though under the law he is entitled to file a claim to terminate this kind of agreement, he might think otherwise anyway. That's why this is a subjective requirement, and the result of this is not null and void, but can be cancelled or can be terminated. Yeah, because perhaps someone that is pushed, that is pressured to sign this kind of agreement might not think to cancel the agreement. Okay lah, I think I will do the agreement anyway, as long as my family is safe. Yeah, I will do what is regulated under the agreement as long as my secret is not exposed, right? And the object of a threat must be something against the law. So if someone tells you that since you do this, I will send a warning letter to you, I will send a demand letter to you, ya. Saya akan kirim peringatan ke kamu ya, kalau kamu kayak gini. That is not a duress, ya. It's not a duress because it's not against the law, right? If we have an agreement and you are breaching your part, I have the right to warn you, right? I have the right to file, ask or demand you to do what you have to do. Similar statement like, if you don't do that, I will file a claim against you, or if you don't do that, I will file a criminal report against you. Yeah. Well, that is allowed under the law, right? So nothing is wrong with that. Yeah. Nothing is wrong. Yeah. But if you are threatening someone to murder, well, that's against the law, right? Murder is against the law, so it's under criminal law. So if you are threatening someone that you will kill if you don't sign, that is duress. Yeah, that is under this provisions. So let's look into what has been said in the ICC. So if you look, the paksaan in here is quite many actually. Yeah, it's from 1323 to 1327. Well, it's quite a lot. Paksaan yang dilakukan terhadap orang yang membuat suatu perjanjian merupakan alasan untuk batalnya perjanjian. Oke, so paksaan alasan untuk batalnya perjanjian. Juga apabila paksaan itu dilakukan oleh seorang pihak ketiga. So even a third party ya can do duress ya. 1324 ya, paksaan telah terjadi apabila perbuatan itu sedemikian rupa hingga dapat menakutkan seorang yang berpikiran sehat ya. So threatening ya, or make frightens a person that is healthy in mind. Dan apabila perbuatan itu dapat menimbulkan ketakutan pada orang tersebut bahwa dirinya atau kekayaannya terancam dengan suatu kerugian yang terang dan nyata. Dan apabila perbuatan itu dapat menimbulkan ketakutan pada orang bahwa dirinya atau kekayaannya terancam. Ya, oke. Ya, this is still a threat ya. Someone frightens you, yeah, someone threatens you, and you are healthy in mind, you are not a crazy guy. So if you are becoming afraid because of that, because of those threats, then that is duress, yeah. Even if it causes fear to you on your own self, ya, makanya kan takut di kill, takut dipukulin. So the duress is not really like they are punching you at this moment or not. I mean, they're punching you and then ask you to sign the deal. Yeah, that is not the case, but they are threatening you as if they will punch you if you don't sign the deal. And also related to your wealth, yeah. Maybe they have the access to remove your wealth, yeah, to take out your wealth. And maybe this is something like a threat to steal, yeah. I will take your car, perhaps I will take your gold, yeah. Many things can happen. Paksaan mengakibatkan batalnya suatu perjanjian tidak saja apabila dilakukan terhadap salah satu pihak, tetapi juga apabila paksaan itu dilakukan terhadap suami atau istri atau sanak keluarga dalam garis ke atas maupun ke bawah. Wow, this is now related to the family ya. It's not only between persons but also if there is a duress by the husband or by the wife and siblings. But the 1326 is the exemption ya. Ketakutan saja karena hormat terhadap ayah, ibu, atau sanak keluarga lain dalam garis ke atas tanpa disertai kekerasan tidaklah cukup ya. So just afraid because of respect ya. That's something else. So the important element I think in 1326 is tanpa disertai kekerasan. Yeah, so there should be a threat, yeah. Even though you are afraid, but that afraid is out of respect of your parents. Yeah, that's not a duress, as what we discussed, yeah. But perhaps your parents forces you to do that, and then threatens you also. If you don't do it, then this will happen, and the threat is against the law, yeah. Those are the elements, right? The threat is against the law, then it is still under duress, ya. Pembatalan sesuatu perjanjian 1327 berdasarkan paksaan tak lagi dapat dituntutnya. Apabila setelah paksaan berhenti, perjanjian tersebut dikuatkan baik secara dinyatakan dengan tegas maupun secara diam-diam, atau apabila seorang melampaukan waktu yang ditentukan oleh undang-undang untuk dipulihkan seluruhnya. Okay, so we will see later that there is an expiry claim period for this. If you see the Indonesian Civil Code, the expiry period for claim is 30 years. But if you want to file a claim based on duress, based on error, mistake, abuse of state, fraud, and everything, that is limited to 5 years. This clause will be repeated in the pembatalan atau kebatalan perikatan. So there is a section under the Indonesian Civil Code called as hapusnya perikatan, expiry or removal of obligation, or the termination of obligation, and that part is regulating the expiry period for this kind of thing. But what is also interesting in here, if you look in the 1327, pembatalan tak lagi dapat dituntutnya, apabila setelah paksaan berhenti. So duress is stopped, right? Duress is prior to the agreement signed, Normally, of course, after the agreement has been signed, there is no point anymore to force, to threaten. Nah, baik setelah paksaan berhenti, perjanjian tersebut dikuatkan. That might happen, like I said, maybe he doesn't want his secret to be exposed anyway, right? Maybe he's happy already because his family is safe, right? So that's why in the movie also sometimes it is hard for the person to snitch, mengadukan orang lain misalnya, because they are protecting their own interest also, They have their own interest in that transaction, in that agreement. Jadi bisa dikuatkan, baik secara dinyatakan dengan tegas maupun secara diam-diam, Well, explicit or implicit or silently, So dengan tegas kan explicitly affirmed, right? Or silently affirmed. So silent affirmation or explicit affirmation. So maybe he changed his mind. Okay, it's fine. I will do it anyway, even though you forced me before. That's an explicit affirmation, right? But maybe he will not say anything, But silently, he's doing his obligation under the agreement. Let's say that the agreement obliges him or her to do something. That's something he does anyway, silently. So he doesn't explicitly affirm that, okay, I will do it. But even though he doesn't explicitly affirm that, he do it anyway. Now that can be seen as silent affirmation. That's why under the jurisprudence, in Indonesia, if an agreement is already performed, this is an important important thing that you can learn. If an agreement is already performed by the party who is hurt, who is under duress, who is under mistake, even who is under fraud, but you do it anyway, Nobody even know whether you realize it or not, that you are hurt or you are under mistake, under duress and everything. There can be no mistake anymore, Jadi kalau kita sebetulnya ada kekilafan, ada penipuan, ada penyalahgunaan keadaan misalnya ya. Tapi dalam perjalanannya tetap dijalankan ya. Seperti nggak ada apa-apa. Nah, itu sebetulnya yang dimaksud di sini nih. Dinyatakan dengan tegas maupun dinyatakan secara diam-diam itu. Jadi itu dianggap seperti silent affirmation. You are considered that you are silently affirm the contents of the agreement. So if you are considered as silently affirmed, it will mean that there is no defective consent anymore. Yeah? There is no defective will or defective consent anymore. And if there is no defective consent, you are not entitled to cancel the agreement any longer. Yeah. Now that is very interesting concept. Yeah. Because if you understand, if you are aware that you are under duress, you should have not done it, right? Kalau kita memang tahu kita diancam, kita taken sesuatu itu cuma karena ancaman, ya harusnya kan kita nggak lakukan ya. Kalau kita memang sebetulnya tidak mau kan. Saya kan sebetulnya nggak mau tanda tangan, tapi karena diancam saya tanda tangan. Nah, kalau you tetap tidak lakukan, nah your defense or your claim will be more legitimate ya. But if you said that you are under duress, under fraud, but you do it anyway what has been agreed under the agreement, there's no point anymore to argue that am I or not under duress, fraud, and everything. Yeah, it's not anymore a discussion about defective will or defective consent, but it is more on whether or not there is a breach of contract. All right. So we move back now to the abuse of state, penyalahgunaan keadaan. Now, when we are talking about abuse of state, penyalahgunaan keadaan, this is not something regulated under Indonesian Civil Code. Yeah. It is not very new, of course. Yeah, it is not new. It has been discussed, I think, quite long. I don't know specifically, but I believe more than 10 years already, maybe more than 20 years. And it is developed based on jurisprudence, yeah, based on the judges' considerations in the decision, court decision, and also through a doctrine, through legal thinking, yeah, expert, and of course through literature outside Indonesia. So, what is the characteristic of penyalahgunaan keadaan? Yeah, there is no one single elements. Yeah, if we look into 1320 for the validity of the agreement, is very clear, right? If we look into what is paksaan, is also quite clear. Yeah? But penyalahgunaan keadaan is something is still developing, I think. Yeah. So there are some conditions or some elements that cause state abuse, yeah. But this might develop, yeah, because it is still a legal concept that is still argued by the experts and by the judges also. But this can be seen as one of those elements, yeah. There is a pressing economic situation. Yeah? There is a problem with his wealth, for example. So he's pressured. Maybe he's at a very close point to bankruptcy, perhaps, right? There is no point to argue for the agreement, so he signs it anyway, yeah, because he's under a very problematic situation economically, right? There is one example. The other one, superior or subordinate relationship. Yeah, perhaps this is between a bank and a customer, right? Bank is always superior than a customer or a borrower, right? Or a deal between employer and employee. Yes, it can also be seen that employer is superior than an employee, right? There are other circumstances that are not in his favor. Yeah, this is very wide. Yeah, so there are circumstances not in his favor, but that made him sign an agreement anyway. Yeah, because to be safe out of it, right? The agreement contains a lame relationship in the mutual obligations between the parties. This is talking about the contents now. Yeah, so it's unbalanced. Yeah, it's not balanced at all. It's just pushing one person to do his obligations and without a similar or a balanced counter obligation. A huge loss to either party. Yeah, perhaps there will be a huge loss. So that's why that guy, that party will have to sign the agreement. Yeah. So at the closing means on the signing. Yeah, at the closing of the agreement means at the signing of the agreement, one of the party is in a pinch state due to existence. Pinch maksud saya itu terpojok ya, dia terpojok nih. So it might be hard to differentiate between duress and abuse of state. Yeah. There is also a threat in here, abuse of state. Yeah. Because superior subordinate relationship, of course, can make a threat, right? Or maybe not very strong threat, but gentle threat is also a threat, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So it is not very similar, of course, to the duress. Yeah. It is different, but there is some sort of overlaps in here. Yeah. Sometimes it may not be easy to differentiate between duress and state abuse. Yeah. But we can see that the duress is wider. Yeah. It can be any type of coercion, any type of threat. But this one is focusing more on economic situation. Yeah. Losses. Yeah. Huge losses. Superior subordinate relationship. Yeah. So unbalanced. So more focusing on unbalanced, actually. Yeah. Unbalanced situation, whether because of the economic situation, losses, opportunity, or superior subordinate. Yeah, where the superior is a lot stronger than the subordinate. So I think the state abuse is focusing more on that. But it is not only focusing on the contents, yeah, but also to what happens on the signing of an agreement. So the state abuse is not focusing only on the unbalanced obligation between one party to the other, yeah, but also what happens by the time the agreement was signed, yeah, whether there is a threat, yeah, whether there is a physical force done, yeah, a threat that the deal will not be given to this, or the project will not be given to certain party anymore if you don't do this and that. Yeah, that is considered as a state abuse. Yeah, so not only focusing on the contents, what has been agreed, that is not balanced, but also to what happens at the time the agreement is signed. So the two cases that I give this morning, one will relate to the state abuse, yeah. So you can learn how the judges see into this. And the second one I think is related to fraud. Okay, so we have talked about error, mistake, duress, state abuse, and now we're talking about fraud. Yeah. So penyalahgunaan keadaan, I don't bring up the ICC because there is no stipulation on it. Yeah. It's developed in the jurisprudence and doctrines. Now, fraud. 1328 of the ICC stipulates that fraud is the reason for the cancellation of the agreement. The law does not define what is meant by fraud. Well, it's not true, actually. It is not clearly defining what is a fraud, but fraud happens when that is under 1328. In fraud, the party who deceives with his or her resourcefulness imparts an untrue picture of the characteristic of the object of the covenant, so that the other party is moved or has the will to close the covenant. Covenant itu maksudnya janji, obligation lah, which is a statement of his will. Thus, his will and statement of will are the same. Only in the event of error, the false image is deliberately instilled by one party through deception to the other. Fraud must be committed by another party. Okay, let's just look into 1328 ya. Penipuan merupakan suatu alasan untuk pembatalan perjanjian. Apabila tipu muslihat yang dipakai, so there is penipuan and then tipu muslihat ya. Tipu muslihat yang dipakai oleh salah satu pihak adalah sedemikian rupa hingga terang dan nyata bahwa pihak yang lain tidak telah membuat perikatan itu jika tidak dilakukan tipu muslihat tersebut ya. So again, the agreement has been signed, right? But then he realized that he is under fraud, under fraud. And then how to prove that he is under fraud? Dia harus bilang bahwa memang telah terjadi tipu muslihat, right? And then the second paragraph penipuan tidak dipersangkakan tetapi harus dibuktikan. Nah, a lot of arguments now. What does it mean? Penipuan tidak dipersangkakan tetapi harus dibuktikan ya. If we look into alat bukti alat bukti, you can see tentang pembuktian dan daluarsa. (1865, 1866 Alat-alat bukti terdiri atas bukti tulisan, bukti dengan saksi-saksi, persangkaan pengakuan sumpah. Kan agak aneh jadi Jadi alat bukti itu persangkaan Di sini dibilang tidak dipersangkakan tetapi harus dibuktikan. Persangkaan juga bagian dari alat bukti kan sebetulnya So this is a bit confusing, but some judges and also experts interpret this second clause as you have to prove it means there should be a criminal decision first before you consider someone doing a fraud or not. So penipuan dalam perjanjian is different than penipuan dalam pidana Penipuan fraud under criminal law is regulated in where? 378 I think. Indonesian Criminal Code, Kitab Undang-Undang Hukum Pidana. There is also an element of unlawful act there, intentionally doing tipu muslihat and everything So some experts and also some judges look into this clause, penipuan tidak dipersangkakan tetapi harus dibuktikan, and then they conclude that before a party can bring a claim to terminate an agreement, that party will have to obtain first a court's decision that a fraud exists, criminally. So that's how to see, tetapi harus dibuktikan, But of course, not everyone agrees on this, Many experts also have a view that dibuktikan di perkara di pengadilan. You have to prove it through court. But if you look, when you look error, duress, and then fraud, only fraud that has this kind of clause, penipuan tidak dipersangkakan tapi harus dibuktikan is only on the fraud. There is nothing similar about it under duress, There is nothing similar under error or mistake. So one expert said that is already an intention of the lawmaker, siapa yang buat kalau perdata ini udah kita nggak tahu siapa, that they want to declare this as very important, That's why they have to be proven. And this expert said, because everything has to be proven, right? That's the common procedure under civil case, that what you have claimed you must prove. But only fraud that has this clause. So that's why it is very important, and it should be seen as a criminal court decision. Well, that's interesting, So, and in reality, if you research, there are many judges who consider that if you file a claim based on fraud, but on the civil court, not on the criminal court, it will be a premature claim, since you don't have a criminal court decision. So you must have a criminal court decision first before you file a civil claim for fraud. The same thing applies, There is also a jurisprudence. If you have obtained a criminal decision, a criminal court decision, and then based on that you file a civil claim to cancel the agreement, it is cancelled because it is already fulfilled. It is very clear already that someone else is doing a fraud to you. Now, what are the examples? It's not easy, it's hard to differentiate sometimes between between error, mistake, and fraud, But I think the crucial point is, in fraud, the fraudster or the party doing the fraud is actively promoting and doing the fraud, doing the tipu muslihat, is active, very active. And the lies are not only one, but several lies or series of lies or even action, For example, the trademark of the proposed car is changed. Ini maksudnya barang yang ditawarkan itu mereknya diganti sama dia. Ya, bisa aja kan ya. Kalau mobil, I think it's hard for the car, Maybe for other type of goods, it's a lot easier, Because for car, we already understand the design, We will find out if perhaps is changed to perhaps, it's a different, well, even though it is similar, but it's different, right? We will know it anyway. So I think if other than car, perhaps it is easier to be frauded. Its machine number is falsified. Now that is more possible, right? Because we don't really look pay attention to the machine number, but machine number is falsified. That is more easier to say that yes, this is a fraud, and many things. Yeah. So actually, it's like a criminal fraud. Yeah. You are frauding someone. It is not enough if the person doing a fraud only states one lie. One lie, ya, bukan one lie. But at least it must be a series of lies or action that is considered as fraud, as what the car seller did. So it's not only one lie, yeah. It's a series of lies, yeah. It's an series of actions influencing the other party to buy or to enter into an agreement, yeah. And these are, the last point comes from J. Satrio. I think it's good to have it. The person who feels himself deceived is obliged to prove in front of the judge that if there is no fraud, then he is unlikely to close the agreement. If there is no fraud, then he is unlikely to close the agreement. If there is no fraud, then he does not close the agreement with the terms of that agreement. With that terms, ya. Jadi artinya kalau tidak ada penipuan, saya nggak bakalan taken itu agreement. Nah, jadi justru karena ada penipuan, makanya saya taken. Jadi betul-betul dia karena ditipu dia taken. Ya, kalau tidak ada penipuan, saya nggak mungkin taken. Sama, jika tidak ada penipuan, saya nggak mungkin menyetujui syarat-syarat ketentuan seperti itu gitu loh. Nah, ini yang kedua ya. If there is no fraud, then he does not close the agreement with that terms. Nggak mungkin saya setujuin syarat-syarat itu, kecuali saya tertipu saat itu. Gitu. Kecuali saya ditipu. Nah, jadi, the penipuan is only under 1328 ya. So Duress has several provisions ya. Kekhilafan is only 11322, penipuan is only 11328 ya. And there are so many cases related to the penipuan. We can learn from many things. One, I told you already that if you have done your performance, your obligation under the agreement, you cannot say that you are under fraud anymore because you do it willingly. Yeah. This is related to what we have discussed before under duress, ya, pengakuan diam-diam, pengakuan eks tegas, ya. But we will look again at the other provisions that related to that, ya. And penipuan, an interesting point for you to understand that the judges also say that if the agreement is signed before the notary, so it is an authentic deed, yeah, akte authentic, there should be no fraud anymore. Yeah, I think the judges would like to say that it is very transparent agreement, right? The parties come into before, in the presence of the notary, and then the notary will of course read out the contents of the deed before the parties sign it. So everybody hears the contents, understand the contents before the parties sign the agreement in notarial deed. So the judges said, since the agreement is using notarial deed, there should be no more fraud. You know, that is interesting, right? And I think it's quite logical, yeah, even though it might not be the same in other cases, but I think it's a good one. It's a good point that since you sign it in the presence of the notary, which means that there is a third party, right? It's not only two parties now. Well, the notary is not the third party in the agreement, but there is a third party involved in your agreements, right? In this two-party agreement, there is a third party present, and the notary is a public officer, right? He is respected. He reads out the agreement. You understand the contents, and you sign it anyway. And it is a perfect evidence under the law, right? Akte otentik kan perfect evidence. So what do you expect? And then suddenly you come back and said you are under fraud. No, cannot. That cannot be happening. So that's interesting, yeah. One is that if you do your obligation, there should be no more fraud. The second, if you are signing an agreement in the presence of the notary and under a notarial deed, there should be no fraud anymore. So there are limitations, yeah, and limitations on that, on the authentic deed, is not regulated in the ICC, yeah. That is developed under jurisprudence, and if we look into the performance, that is under the ICC actually, but then affirmed by the judges under jurisprudence, yeah. So yeah, those things we should understand, yeah. What we learn in the ICC, yeah, what we learn from the books when we read and we would like to understand about contract law, we can never forget to look into how the judges view those things, yeah. Because in reality, when we have problem, we will have to go to the judge, yeah. We cannot go anywhere else, right? We have the court, so we have to go to them. So we have to understand how is their view on this kind of situation. And mahkamaagung.go.id is open, right? So you can look into it, you can download, you can learn, you can read, and then you can understand a lot of things that are not in the book. Yeah, you can learn a lot of things that are not in the book. That is fraud, okay? We have talked about fraud. This is something that is not as easy as it is written in 1328, yeah? So many fraud claims are not admitted actually in the court. So many are declined, yeah? So many are declined. So it is very hard to prove that there is a fraud under an agreement. And so many variations also that I cannot explain now. You will find it out in the so many court decisions related to the fraud. Yeah? There are so many variations of fraud. Yeah. And if we look into duress can be done by the third party, right? But fraud is only related to two parties in the agreement. A fraud cannot be done by the third party not related to the agreement, yeah. But there is also a claim saying that a third party is also doing the fraud. So yeah, those are the variations that I mean. Okay, so just a little bit more before there will be a Q&A and then a list of attendance, yeah. Consensual principle. So there are limits to this principle, right? Consensus, yeah, agreement between the parties. It is a principle. When you agree on something, it will become binding, yeah, like the freedom of contract principle, right? The consensual becomes binding. But it is limited, right? Under duress, under error, mistake, fraud, state abuse. But there is also a formality aspects that we have to understand. Yeah? Formally of an agreement. Formality of an agreement. For example, a grant of immovable good must be made with a notarial deed. Jadi hibah untuk benda tidak bergerak harus dibuat secara notarial. Ya, itu perjanjian formal. Because if it is not made in notarial deed, it will be considered as null and void. Or settlement agreement, ya, itu perjanjian perdamaian ya, must be made in writing. Jadi perjanjian perdamaian harus dibuat secara tertulis. You cannot agree verbally. Yeah. It is not a settlement agreement under the law. So even though you have made it, it will not be considered as a settlement agreement. Yeah. These are called as formal agreement. I think you can say that agreement must be made in Bahasa Indonesia. I think that is the principle of formality also. Yeah, the formality of language. Every Indonesian party doing a transaction or doing an agreement with other party must use Indonesian language, but can also use translation, right? Or can use other language. So I think that is the formality of the agreement also. Yeah. That's the formal aspect of an agreement. So that's why if you don't make an agreement in Indonesia, but fully in English, the formality is defective. And if the formality is defective, it is not considered as an agreement at all. It will be considered as null and void. As in here, yeah, if formality is not met, the agreement will be considered as null and void. So who can request for a cancellation? We haven't talked about this, right? But the answer is clear. The party who suffers due to that agreement, which the law has given legal protection. Jadi siapa sih? Ya, yang ditipu, yang dipaksa, yang khilaf, ya. So the party who is under error, who is under duress, who is under state abuse, who is under fraud, that is the party that can file a claim to cancel the agreement. There is an expiry period for 5 years. Yeah. So you see in here, tentang kebatalan dan pembatalan perikatan is starting from 1446. Yeah, 1446. You can look in here, the expiry of 5 years. You can look under 1454. Dalam semua hal di mana suatu tuntutan atau pernyataan batalnya suatu perikatan tidak dibatasi dengan suatu ketentuan undang-undang khusus hingga suatu waktu yang lebih pendek, waktu itu adalah 5 tahun. So 5 years ya. Waktu tersebut mulai berlaku. Nah, di sini ada dalam halnya pengampuan, dalam halnya paksaan, sejak hari paksaan itu telah berhenti. Dalam halnya kekhilafan, sejak hari diketahuinya kekhilafan atau penipuan. Ya. For the person who is not competent, since the person becomes competent. Yeah, okay. In duress, since the duress has stopped. In fraud or error, since the day the fraud or error is found. So you have to read this, yeah. 1454. And then 1456. Ya. Waktu yang disebutkan di atas ini yang ditetapkan untuk memajukan tuntutan tidaklah berlaku terhadap kebatalan yang dimajukan selaku pembelaan yang mana selalu dapat dikemukakan. So in defense, the expiry period is not applicable. Ya. Second point, there is an expiry period, right? Exception in defense, the expiry period is not applicable. If let's say that you sign an agreement, it is under duress, yeah. But since it is under duress, you don't want to perform your obligation, right? You don't perform it. And then what happens? The other party will file a claim against you, asking you to perform your obligation, correct? So when that party files a claim against you, you are under duress before. These 5 years are not expired because in defense, the expiry period is not applicable. So you don't agree, you don't do the agreement, and then the other party files a claim against you on non-performance or breach of contract, on that, when that claim is lodged against you, that's when you defend yourself. Even though it is lapsed 5 years, you are still having the right to defend and saying that there was a duress. That's why this agreement should be cancelled. That's interesting, right? The 1454. And what is important is 1456. So this is the 1456 is very related to what we discussed before about duress in 1327. Ya, it's very similar. Tuntutan untuk pernyataan batal gugur. Nah, this is claim to cancel. Jika orang belum dewasa, orang yang ditaruh di bawah pengampuan, perempuan yang bersuami, atau orang yang dapat memajukan adanya paksaan, kekhilafan, atau penipuan, secara tegas atau secara diam-diam, telah menguatkan perikatannya setelah ia menjadi dewasa, setelah hapus pengampuan, setelah pembubaran perkawinan, setelah paksaan berhenti, atau setelah diketahui adanya kekhilafan atau penipuan. So that what we talked before about silent affirmation or explicit affirmation. Explicit, you are declaring that you will do it, right? When you declare it explicitly or publicly, your right to file a claim to cancel is gone, because it means that's an explicit affirmation. When you do the obligation, even though you don't do any public announcement or public declaration or explicit affirmation, you are still considered as silently affirmed. So when you affirm, whether silently or explicitly, you will be considered, the fraud or the duress, the mistake will be considered gone. So you don't have the right to file a claim anymore. And so next one is means to request for cancellation. Of course, you file a claim. One is the interested party actively claim that the agreement is cancelled. If you are under duress, you are not happy with it. You are under fraud, you are not happy with it. You file a claim against the other party so that the agreement is cancelled. Second is wait until he or she is claimed to fulfill that agreement before the judges. This claimed party will state that he entered into an agreement when he was not yet competent, agreed upon duress, or he was under a mistake or due to fraud. So these are the things how to cancel the agreement.